world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 5th of January, year of our Lord 2026. Well, it's a new year, and it's already a year of war and chaos. What do you think the consequences are going to be for the Venezuelan kidnapping and invasion? And I'm not talking about immediate consequences, but long term. And there will be consequences, domestically and internationally. Where will Trump attack next? Will it be Iran, Mexico, Canada, maybe Greenland? And what about this whataboutism that we see his apologists putting out there? Do you understand that is nothing other than the living constitution idea of the left being adopted by the right? It's all about being ruled by precedents instead of by written law. And then we're going to take a look at the calls from Israeli powerful people to end the First Amendment in the United States, as we're told, to save it. We have to end it to save it. And we have fourth turning unrest that is accelerating even in Iran. So we're going to take a look at this. And what did you notice about New Year's Eve this year? We saw something that was radically different in our family and in friends and family across the country. Well, I'm going to begin with an op-ed piece that we just put up this morning on Substack. My opinions about this. I called it, it's a long title, Trump's Venezuelan Oil Heist, the logical progression of the drug war from domestic theft to global predatory and piracy, and the death of law, really. It's been a long time. It's been clear for a long time that Trump's cover story about Venezuela and fentanyl was a lie. Everybody knew it. Trump knew it. They would tell you out loud what they were really going to do, what they really wanted, regime change, the oil, all the rest of this stuff, and then he would come back to it periodically. Well, now they have come back to it again. They've come back to this by pretending that it is a law enforcement operation. Even as the Trump administration spoke about regime change and getting the oil, they would periodically return to the narrative of fentanyl tracking. With such bold defiance of the Constitution as well as international law about the conduct of even a declared war, why return to the drug war narrative? Well, Americans have long been asleep over the true purpose of the drug war. Listen, it was never about ending the drug addiction of individual Americans. It was always about feeding the addiction to power of the U.S. government. And to do that, they had to sweep aside the law. It was a perfect vehicle for that. And now we've seen this play out not just domestically, but internationally. Like Trump's phony declared emergencies to give himself powers of a dictator, the drug war has been serving the same purpose for government and law enforcement in general for over 50 years now. So what's new is the aspect of militarized, quote-unquote, law enforcement and global civil asset forfeiture taken up to the level of oil tankers with millions of barrels of oil on them. This is something that was created by the drug war, and it's being taken to an international level. Gone is the usual CIA tactic of assassination. We have to pretend now that we're upholding some standard of law as they violate every law and moral principle in this action. It's just like the Israeli guy who, Shlomo is his first name, he said, we got to destroy the First Amendment in order to save it in America. Well, you try to do that and see what happens. That's one of the reasons why there's so much blowback against Israel. Confiscating cars, homes, businesses without finding anybody guilty, without even charging them with a crime, has now gone to the international level. We skip the due process of deliberations and declarations about war, and we just go straight for the spoils. Our government has been operating as thieves domestically for so long, they're now obviously extending the practice to piracy abroad. It's disheartening to see people abandon their former principles, and I'm talking about the grassroots people here, and cheer the theft of oil, Commentators like the Kobayashi letter are so excited that we just took control of $17 trillion worth of oil. He wrote on Twitter, he said, in just 12 hours, the U.S. has gained control of oil reserves worth more than the entire GDP of all countries in the world, except for the U.S. and China. That's 4 times larger than the GDP of Japan. Most people don't realize how much the world just changed. Well, I have to ask all these people. He put that, or whoever it is, no, he or she or whoever, put that tweet out, and everybody started copying it. I mean, copying it verbatim. Got a tremendous amount of play. And you had a lot of MAGA people, a lot of people who would call themselves conservatives, but they're not trying to conserve anything. They're not trying to conserve morality or the rule of law, any of that stuff. So I just ask you, who is going to profit from this wealth? Who do you think? We've already had a couple of dozen businessmen, I'm going to talk about this, have gone down to Venezuela to loot the country. These vulture capitalists will profit, but there won't be $17 trillion paid down on our $38 trillion debt. And think about it. You know, we had, when Trump ran back in 2016, and he was being interviewed, he said and asked about his opposition to regime change. And he was adamant we shouldn't be doing that. He said, come on, we've got a $19 trillion deficit here in the United States. We should be taking care of things here domestically instead of getting involved in these expensive wars abroad. Well, he and Biden have doubled that $19 trillion deficit. They don't care, or debt. They don't care at all about the debt. And so, of course, as they point out, you know, $17 trillion of estimated oil in the ground at today's market prices, that ignores the fact that you've got to extract that and do other things that are going to be expensive. But they said, oh, even taking half of that. You know, so we got $8.5 trillion that we just took overnight. Isn't that great? We have an America that cheers that. We have conservatives who cheer that. And it's for partisan reasons. You know that they would not be cheering it. If it was the Democrats doing it, they would oppose it. We have no principles. We only have political parties left. And so when Trump ran, again, it was only $19 trillion. And 5 years of Trump and 4 years of Biden, they have doubled that. This is not going to go into some imaginary sovereign wealth fund. It will go to American oil companies. And guess what? The big businesses like that don't pay taxes. And we're going to talk about the taxes coming up. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants people to go on a tax revolt. I think you should understand just how revolting this whole system is, and you should understand that they don't care if you don't pay the taxes. Oh, they'll throw you in jail probably. But it really isn't going to put any kind of restrictions on them. The only thing that's going to restrict them is a loss of reserve currency status, which is happening because of these types of actions by Biden and by Trump. That will stop them. The income tax is not there to fund the government. Don't be stupid. The income tax is there to defund you, to keep you poor so that you don't threaten them. That's the purpose of the income tax, Charlie Brown. So it's not going to go into some imaginary sovereign wealth fund. And it's not even going to go to recouping the costs of this military operation. No, it's going to go into the pockets of people who are cronies and donors of Trump. It'll be a windfall profit for them, just like the windfall profit that Trump gave Pfizer and Moderna. We paid for their production of these bioweapons, and we handed that stuff to them, and they got to keep all of the profits because it was part of their bigger agenda. Same thing is going to happen with this. Expect to see a lot of billionaires made overnight out of this type of thing, just like we saw with Pfizer and Moderna. Trump gave them the bioweapon. He paid for it. He put it on the national credit card while he bribed the hospitals to kill people with ventilators and call it a pandemic. And speaking of which, somebody made a perfectly timed move in the financial markets just to take advantage of this, just like 9/11. Isn't that interesting? More shocking than Trump's action in Venezuela's reaction to this domestically. Nothing shows the corruption and the moral bankruptcy of the USA more than the "I voted for this" crowd. They're cheering lies. They're cheering corruption. They're totally oblivious to the precedents being set. Even as they come back and say, well, so-and-so did it, so what about it? So now we can do it, right? And they don't realize how that is undermining the rule of law, the Constitution, all the rest of this stuff, which, again, we know that they take an oath to it and immediately break that. So this is power that they don't realize. This is power that will be used. It will be used by people you don't like. It'll be used for purposes that you don't like and policies that you don't like. Why are they cheering this? This is stupid as seeing the leftists cheering Mom Danny when he says, the era of big government is back. And they say, oh, I haven't felt this great since Obama. There's a kind of sadomasochism about that, isn't it? It's like, tie me up and beat me with government. I just love it when you do that. And put a gag in my mouth, too, like the cutting down on free speech. But the MAGA crowd is doing the same thing. It's not just the precedent for lawlessness and war on drugs. The logical progression, as I said at the beginning, of this cancer that is called the war on drugs, it is metastasized throughout every police department with all the wars that he's starting. He says he watched on them and special steel cutting equipment that could have broken through the safe room. Fortress? All that. He told us that she lied us into a war, and then he makes her the head of the CIA. Trump said that Maduro was in a house that was more like a fortress than a house. Does Trump live in a place that's more like a fortress than a house? I mean, what about Mar-a-Lago? You don't think that he's got a safe room in Mar-a-Lago? I wonder how many safe rooms he's got in Mar-a-Lago. What about the White House? Is it a fortress? This is what I said. This is absolutely amazing. You know, that this shows that Maduro is a crook because he's living in a fortified house with guards and a steel door. Trump says it had steel doors, what they call a safety space, solid steel all around. And as if he doesn't have that orders of magnitude more. He was trying to get into the room, but he got bum rushed so fast that he didn't get into it. But he said, it didn't matter if he did. The guys that were there had blowtorches on them and special steel cutting equipment that could have broken through the safe room. So it's just amazing. Amazing thing, amazing job that these people did. Isn't that great, you know? Yeah. When you have that kind of force at your fingertips, you have to be held to a higher standard. So I'm just going to say, the way this guy's going to war with everybody globally, Trump better make sure that he's got really good doors in that bunker that he's building that he calls the ballroom. His ballroom bunker with all the wars that he's starting. He says he watched the whole thing from his home in Mar-a-Lago. He said it was like watching a TV show. Yeah, I know. I've seen the reruns over and over again. I've seen this movie before. Bondi said they will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil and American courts. Well, your day's coming too, Bondi. You better hope that Trump's got a preemptive pardon for you. And you better hope it sticks. The PSA for, here's Vance saying, here's a PSA for everyone saying that this was illegal. Maduro had multiple indictments in the U.S. for narco-terrorism. Oh, okay, so if you got an indictment against somebody in absentia, then that's a green light to invade a country? That is the absurdity that's being sold by J.D. Vance. It's also the absurdity that's been bought into by Mike Lee, who likes to describe himself as somebody who follows the rule of law and the Constitution. He got into a lot of trouble for questioning Trump on this. He got ratioed on Twitter. And I'll talk about that in just a moment here. But anyway, this is the war on drugs. The logical progression, as I said at the beginning, of this cancer that is called the war on drugs. It is metastasized throughout every police department in our country, and now it is moving to the international level. And it's not a surprise, because the war on drugs was not an invention of that despot Richard Nixon. If the president does it, it's not illegal, right? It was created by the United Nations, and they were the ones to cry the first and the loudest about the decriminalization of medical marijuana. It is a UN agenda, and the Republicans love this UN agenda. As I said before, it was never about individual addiction to drugs. It was about the government's addiction to power and how they had to remove the rule of law in order to be able to satisfy that addiction. So War Pete tweeting out, he effed around and found out. Yeah, good for you. Spoken like a thug that you are. Trump says, we will run Venezuela. Okay, well, yeah, Trump has tried to run America as well. You know, he's taking over companies, and he's wants to run the companies. He's not just like, this is a failing company that's important, here's some money, you guys try to get this thing together. No, he wants to actually run the companies, and run the country. And he wants to run the country into the ground, quite frankly. It's what he's doing with his tariffs and his vacillation. Actually, it's more like oscillation, because it's on again, off again, on again, off again. After all of his failed central planning, after all of the failed nation building that we have done in various places that we've destroyed, he's now going to run Venezuela. Actually, it's going to be Marco Rubio. Little Marco is going to run Venezuela. He may deliberately run it into the ground, just because he's got an axe, a chip on his shoulder, and an axe to grind. He doesn't like Cuba. He's trying to run Cuba into the ground. His family migrated from Cuba, so he really has been aching to get back at Cuba for the longest time. Well, you know, Trump has bankrupted half a dozen casinos. Maybe we'll see how many countries he can bankrupt. Not just the U.S., but maybe he can also bankrupt Venezuela. We'll see. Again, somebody who is the king of debt, the king of bankruptcy. Trump doesn't know anything about running anything. He's a lucky loser, as the book pointed out. He comes in with a big stash of cash, and he doesn't know how to operate it. We're now we'll close in the next year or two on $40 trillion. Yeah, that's Trump. It was 19 when he was running for president. No service members or military equipment was lost. Isn't that great? Well, it is great. I'm glad to see that no Americans were killed, but they don't care if Venezuelan civilians are killed. That doesn't matter, right? Not in their calculation. That's one of the first issues that shows you how we have lost our moral compass. We're going to stay in Venezuela until such time as a proper transition can take place. We're going to do nation building and a little bit of nation looting as we go along. And right away, he comes out and trashes the woman who was the leader of the opposition, the one who won the Nobel Prize for Peace over him. He trashes her, and he makes overtures to the vice president of Venezuela, who is a hardcore socialist and Zionist. And that was one of the things that was unforgivable for Maduro. He was anti-Israel. He was pro-Iran. In terms of his rhetoric, he didn't really have much that he could do about it, but he had to be taken out. So Trump repeated the claim that Venezuelan seized and stole American oil. You know, that was America's oil in the ground that was there. Yeah, that's right. Trump says what happened to Maduro can happen to others in Venezuela and can happen to other countries as well. That's why I call him Precedent Trump. He says he's not afraid to deploy troops to Venezuela if needed. Well, finally, the Senate may have something to say about that. They're talking about stopping him from sending any more troops. But there's going to be a lot of troops that are going to be necessary to be sent to Venezuela. If you look at the past, it'd be a shame, he says, if anything were to happen to Venezuela. So you just do what I say, right? Just like a mafia boss. Nice country you got there. A lot of oil you got there. It'd be a shame if anything were to happen to that. Yeah, well, it wasn't that long ago that Tulsi Gabbard, it was only 2 months ago, she said this about regime change.
The old Washington way of thinking is something we hope is in the rearview mirror and something that has held us back for too long. For decades, our foreign policy has been trapped in a counterproductive and endless cycle of regime change or nation building. It was a one-size-fits-all approach of toppling regimes, trying to impose our system of governance on others, intervene in conflicts that were barely understood, and walk away with more enemies than allies. The results: trillions spent, countless lives lost, and in many cases a creation of greater security threats. The rise of Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS. President Trump was elected by the American people to put an end to this. And from day one, he has showed a very different way to conduct foreign policy.
That didn't age too well, and that was only 2 months ago. And of course, Tulsi Gabbard, when she was running for president, what was it, back in 2020? She was saying the same things. She hasn't changed in what she's saying, but she is completely out of step with the new Donald Trump. And the new Donald Trump is completely out of step with candidate Trump as well. Remember this?
The country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. Our current strategy of nation building and regime change is a proven absolute failure.
We will break the cycle of regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change that Hillary Clinton pushed in Iraq, in Libya, in Egypt, and in Syria. Regime change takes chaos.
You've seen how that works over the last 20 years. That hasn't been too good. Not a reckless interventionist globalism.
We're getting out of the nation-building business. We're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place.
Yeah, that was then, this is now, right? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of MAGA people are feeling betrayed yet again. How many times does it take before you people get out of your stupor? And then we've got Kristi Noem talking about the fact that we're going to now bring in Venezuelan immigrants, refugees. And of course, this is one of the things people said from the very beginning, as they said, if Trump goes into Venezuela, we're going to be flooded with Venezuelan immigrants. And now Kristi Noem, head of ICE, is actually ICE's department underneath her. But now she's cheering this.
Venezuela today is more free than it was yesterday, and it's going to continue to be that way as long as President Trump is in the White House and is making sure that he's protecting the interests of the American people, because that ripple effect will continue to bring that kind of liberty to Venezuela as well. These programs, we're bringing integrity back to them. The decisions are made in conjunction with the State Department, with the White House, and then we at Homeland Security implement them and make sure that they are followed through. So every individual that was under TPS has the opportunity to apply for refugee status, and that evaluation will go forward, but we need to make sure that our programs actually mean something and that we're following the law. And that's how that decision with TPS was made.
Yeah, under Biden, they gave them temporary protected status, I think is what TPS stood for, but that's essentially what it was, if that's not exactly the words that they used. He wanted to have more people from Venezuela. And Maduro was opening up his prisons just like Castro had done when I was living in Florida as a young man, sending in criminals into Florida from Cuba. And so it's not just blood, it's not just treasure, it's also immigration. And that's what we get out of all this, right? We get a flood of Venezuelan immigrants just get a pass to come in, just like under Biden. Isn't that interesting? But the thing that we have to focus on, as Trump is saying, no, just focus on the fact this is one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of the American military. Yes, think of it as a fireworks display. So it was a culmination of months of planning and rehearsal, an operation that, frankly, only the U.S. military could have undertaken, said the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane. It's something that they have now unleashed as a new Pandora's box of chaos. And they're going to reap the whirlwind with China. You just watch and see what happens with this. So as all this is happening, War Pete says, well, they effed around and found out. And Trump says, these other people down there in Latin America, they need to watch their ass. That's what he had to say. These guys are crude thugs. They're mafia. They're RICO kind of guys. Finally, Secretary of State Marco Rubio appeared to directly threaten the leaders of Cuba. If I were in power in Cuba, I'd be very worried right now. He's not very worried about being in power in Venezuela, as many people are pointing out. He's going to be the viceroy of Venezuela. Kind of alliteration that, at least sounds impressive. Whether it is or not, it just means he's going to govern it. You think he's up to the task? He's already got a lot of different hats that he's wearing. He's already a Secretary of State and other powers that we haven't seen since Richard Nixon gave that kind of authority to Henry Kissinger. So now he gets to rule Venezuela as well. And again, you keep hearing this rhetoric, just as Jon Stewart pointed out. He didn't put this one in. They love to talk about shock and awe. Shock and awe. That's what it's all really about, right? Just recycled sound bites. And hey, we got the power, we should use it to steal. Jonathan Turley said this operation will be justified as executing a criminal warrant and responding to an international drug cartel, a very similar legal framework to the one used against Noriega in 1989. There is precedent for supporting this, he says. Well, you know what George H.W. Bush did when he went after Noriega was criminal. And the Panama invasion was criminal. There was an excellent documentary about that. It was narrated by Elizabeth Montgomery. I remember we had it in our video store, and I pushed it to everybody who could. You should go back and take
Thank you for watching The Bad Civil Servant on YouTube and North American House Hippo on Rumble. The only channels where you don't have to like and subscribe if you don't want to.
President, I have ordered the immediate revocation of his green card. Smell you later.
Sir, of all the lies you've told, which one is your favorite?
I don't lie.
Yeah, that's our favorite one too.
We're all very bad people. You're so unfair to me. I hate you so much.